I'd like to call the Village of North Fond du Lac Board of Trustees meeting to order Monday, August 6th. Audience members are requested to sign in on the sheet provided at the registration table. Citizens wishing to be heard on topics not listed on the agenda may speak under item C. Roll call of officers.
Price.
Here.
Streeter.
Here.
Stutz.
Here.
Will. Here. King is excused.
Stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, any citizen participation? All right, seeing none, going down to announcements. Any announcements? President's business and staff reports. Number 1, employee recognition. I see Carrie is here, so you come up to the podium, please. It's a certificate of appreciation award that Carrie Tackett, with sincere appreciation for 20 years of service to the Village of North Fond du Lac, awarded this day, 20th of July, 2018. Congratulations.
I don't have anything for
Oh, okay.
More court.
Oh, okay. President's Business Administrator, Nick.
Been busy lately to process tonight, so a lot of time's been being spent dealing with that, getting the capital budget put together along with getting it printed and put together for you guys for tonight. We started with 3-ring binders for you guys tonight, so we'll keep adding to that as we discuss. I have had some conversations about a possible economic development business park again. We keep having those pop up. This one seems relatively serious, I guess, at this point, but we'll continue to go down that path. And it's just busy around here right now, this time of year, people on vacations and that, trying to make sure the front desk is covered.
Thanks. Fire EMS, Jake.
Thank you. We were out at the Eden Parade this past weekend. We sent 510 and 504 out there to participate in that. We also participated in a pool event. They had Christmas in July. One of our firefighters was Santa, was transported via the engine to the pool. I was told that the event went very well. We did a joint training with Van Dyne and then the City of Fond du Lac, a water movement training out in the industrial park, and that went very well. I heard from both chiefs from both departments, and they appreciated the invite, and we are looking to set up another training in the near future, just on different topics. That same night, I had to leave a little early. Adam and I went to the EMS Association meeting that was at Flight for Life, and we had somebody from the county social services there to talk about how we can handle certain situations on whether it's a medical call or a fire call, and if there are issues or anything like that inside of someone's home. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Yep.
Public Works Department, Darren.
Just a couple of quick things. Crew worked on replacing a sectional water main last week in Center Street. It had been a section underneath the driveway that we've had some issues with in the past. So we replaced the main so we won't have to tear that driveway up again. We still have to go back and pour the concrete and do the landscaping in that area. But we've also had a couple of main breaks, North Street area, Chapleau and Clinton Street within the last couple of weeks. Warm, dry weather, and then getting some rain and stuff, the ground starts moving, and we've had a couple of main breaks. Hard to predict when and where they're gonna happen. And another thing, this past week, we've made it all summer long and part of last season with the same motor, the main motor for the circulating system in the pool. That one finally went. We have spare motor on hand all the time, so we got that one changed out Thursday morning real quick. Dave and Steve both worked on that, and pool was up and running before swimming lessons started. Other than that, we still continue working on the ash tree removal. We have just shy of 300 trees to remove yet, and then we'll be removing stumps as we get contractor to come in and grind the stumps, and then we'll landscape. For tree planting, it's all gonna depend on how much we budget, whether we get grants for tree planting, I applied for a $20,000 grant this year. We're not selected this year. I'm already working on that for next year. So we'll get the trees replanted as we can.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thanks. Moving down to consent agenda. Number one, approve the minutes of the following village board meetings, 7/16/2018. Number two, approve invoices and authorize checks to be drawn on the respective funds. So this is for the checks dated July 30th. General fund, $14,820.76. Library fund, $829.94. EMS fund, $874.28. Capital projects, $450. Water department, $613.21. Wastewater department, $1,006.91. Stormwater fund, $1,043.90 for a grand total of $19,639. And this is for this board meeting, the checks for this board meeting. General fund, $115,303.10. Library fund, $782.22. EMS fund, $904.03. Capital projects, $1,035. Water department, $5,773.64. Wastewater department, $291.55. Community Development Authority, TIF, $33.64. Stormwater fund, $175.95 for a grand total of $124,299.13. And approve the following operators licenses. Brooke Fryman for Mad Max, April Koenigs for Dollar General, Sarah Greeno for Cornelli's, and Caitlin Heisey for Cornelli's. What is the board's pleasure?
Make the motion to approve?
And a second?
I'll second that.
Got a motion by Will, second by Price to approve the consent agenda. Are there any questions? Nick, just had one thing for the minutes from 7/16. We had, under citizen participation, we had none, but I don't remember Jackie stood up and talked a little bit about the library.
Yeah, I do remember that. I thought yep,
Thank you.
I missed that.
All right, if there aren't any other questions or comments, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Moving down to administrative. Number one, discussion and review of personnel policy manual, chapters 13 through 20, review outstanding issues.
So what I did here was just, we're gonna go over that 13 through 20, which is basically what we did the last time we discussed this. Just to kind of touch base on, there was a few more items that the board directed me to get some more information about, along with some changes that were proposed. So I went back and got those changes made. And with the agenda the way it was tonight, I thought it probably was good to just cover that tonight, and we'd probably have that, just enough time to do that. So I'll just go through those changes. The first one was 1307, which is on page 37. There was a question about entitled for representation and whether or not the village was going to be liable for that. So we looked at some other examples and we changed that to what is in green now. The employee shall have the right to representation during the grievance procedure at the employee's expense. So it makes it very clear at this point. So is everyone good with that language?
Mhm.
The next change would be on page 40. And this was just more of a typo thing. At the end of restrictions, there in the middle of the page, I have arrows on there kind of indicating where it just ended at devices are, and we added being used to that. I don't know if you recall that discussion, that was just missing. Next one's on page 43. This one, I had been asked by a board member to get some comparables for meal allowances. Last time we discussed this, we proposed the IRS rate, which is $51 a day. And then we further broke it up a little bit to 11, 15, and 25 for the meals. I did have the same comparables I had used the last time on the same communities. There.
Thank you.
I don't know if Jake, do you want to look at one? And then Darren. Send one down to Darren. So you've seen the majority of this before, but the last section there where it says meals I added, and those are the communities we had pulled 22 communities and we had 8 responses, and this is, I went through their policies, and this is what they had. So you can see it ranges anywhere from $64 per day for a couple of them, down to $31 a day. So those are the comparables I had here.
I got a couple more. I'm just throwing it out that the state is at 8, 10, and 20. That's what they're at. And the county is at 6, 10, and 15. Well, if you look at that language, I mean, there's room that, let's say you run across a certain event that is cost more, you can submit it. I ain't saying you're not gonna get paid for it, but it's a general guideline, and I think we should be conservative with the village funding. And has there been a problem staying within those guidelines? Has it been an issue?
I-
Go ahead.
I think, I don't have any firsthand experience with that, but I think the last time we discussed this, I know some of I want to say the police chief in particular had, yes, I think there was some concern over going out to eat at a restaurant, trying to cover those costs.
$20 for a dinner, I mean, I think that, I mean, I should say, I don't know, what was the village at?
We were at
19.
19 for dinner.
I think we should be conservative with the village's funds,
But
and there's,
I will say, this is just kind of a point here, that if you add those up, what was in there before, it's actually more than $31.
okay.
Does that make sense? If you add them up, it's actually 37.
But you read below that, you know, B, you
Yep.
do have opportunities if you run across certain events to increase that, so, I mean, you got court, you got EMS, you got fire, you got these people using their services, you got the library. I would think you should use the village's resources as wisely as possible. That's what I would say.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
I'd pass these around, I mean,
Do we have consensus last time? I can't remember.
I thought we did. I had in my notes that we did.
we're not saying anybody can't go somewhere, it might cost them a couple dollars, but in the general scheme of things, I would think it'd be covered.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Mike that just leaving it the way that we had, and if it comes to, submitting that, and there is an issue, I mean, of course, we're gonna work with the employee or, whoever's at the training or conference or whatever. I'm comfortable leaving it at what it currently is, the 8, 10, and 19.
I would be comfortable bringing it up to the state rate, not saying it's a lot of money, but.
Oh, I'm sorry, Randy.
It's okay. I guess, has it been an issue besides with the police chief? Or, because, has it been an issue with other departments that we're too low? I don't know, that's why I'm asking the question.
And I honestly don't know the answer to that, Randy, because my department in dealing with it, I haven't dealt with that a lot. We don't have a lot of meal reimbursements at all. That's why when you ask if it's been an issue, there's not a lot of reimbursement being done. Because there isn't a lot of overnight conferences. I know the police and fire generally maybe have a little bit more involvement with some overnight conferences. The Public Works does for the rural water, but that's mostly.
Mostly meals are included in
Meals
that.
are included. But I think the idea here was to try and simplify it a little bit too, because I do believe it was a little low at the $31 a day, and plus we're trying to simplify things by following an IRS standard.
I can look at breakfast and just $8 for breakfast if you go to any sort of and I know a lot of conferences are at relatively upscale hotels, conference centers, convention centers, and things like that. I mean, I think 8 is a little low for breakfast and lunch and that. But I just was curious if if there's been other issues. I mean, I've attended conferences in the past and just, I understand what, you know, where it's coming, so. I mean, I guess I'm on board with just kind of leaving it as is. We got to be, you know, good stewards with the village dollar, so I mean, I guess I'm okay with it.
I guess the one thing I'll just add to that discussion, I guess, is that the comparables, some of these other comparables that are at 64, there's another publication out there that they're using, and that, what you mentioned about they're in maybe bigger cities. What they do is those $64 ones, they use it, it's another publication, it's not IRS, but it uses they specifically say the Milwaukee rate. So if you look at these indexes, there's rates for different communities around, and that's what that $64 is the Milwaukee rate. And that's how it's broken down.
Ann, did you want to weigh in at all, or?
Sure. I mean, do you guys feel like if someone's traveling, like it's sort of an inconvenience to them, or, and, I sort of agree, especially at $8 for breakfast if you're at a hotel, I think that seems low. And I get what we're saying about using an IRS publication. I know, like when we deal with the government has an index and like there's a bunch of different cities and if this is to cover everywhere, I don't know if we're thinking about Fond du Lac or we're thinking about other places that people are going. I mean, and then it says it could be above. It seems silly to even have it in there if then you're saying, well, then bring in your receipt and it could be above it. I mean, I guess if that's what we're gonna do, then it doesn't really matter what we put in there if we're gonna say it's okay anyways. I don't think it's a big issue. I don't think we travel that much. So I guess I'm sort of indifferent just because I think it's not that big of an issue either way.
The courts travel every week. They always have meals and allowances, for travel. But it's spelled out pretty clear, at 3, it says if meals part of the conference convention instructional program, it would be attending, that full amount will be reimbursed with proper documentation, so it's spelled out about.
Well, what that's saying though is if it's part of the conference and it says if a meal is part of the conference, and that there's a high, some of those conferences say it's a $30 meal charge. That's what that's referring to.
Mm-hmm.
If the understanding is that if somebody goes out of town and they spend $12 on breakfast and submit that, and they're gonna get reimbursed for that, if that's the understanding that it's costing more, then I don't really think that's what this policy is trying to say. I think it's just saying that if it's part of the conference and it's more than that.
And they can get reimbursed for that if they request it.
How? If their breakfast is $12, how are they gonna get reimbursed for that? By this policy?
Read in there a little bit.
Must be accompanied by seats interior. Okay, the item B. I guess what I don't like about that is if that's what we're saying is going to happen, it creates somebody has to make that decision at some point. Or if it's just an IRS publication rate, it's much easier to enforce.
It works for the county and works for the state, it's all you can tell.
The county and the state have this, if it's over, then they're allowed.
What's that?
The county and state have this flexibility.
I don't think they do, no.
Oh.
I don't think they have that flexibility that the village has.
So you're
my
saying
knowledge.
use these rates and get
Yep.
rid of B, sort of? Is that what
It's
you're
pretty much
saying?
if you read what I sent you, I don't think the county, I shouldn't say, I don't think the state has, I don't know about the county.
So I guess I just have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
The court travels every week or all the time? And
They have court at different locations, Green Lake, and they're there over the lunch hour.
And they get a lunch allowance?
Mhm.
Okay, I didn't know.
The biggest thing to go back is that this really hasn't been a whole big issue why we have to increase the
Mhm.
I guess I don't have enough experience to say whether or not it has or hasn't been an
We
issue.
can
I don't know.
revisit it
Mhm.
a year from now if it happens to be a big issue. And I do agree we could bump it up a little bit, but I think some of the ones that you proposed were quite high.
That's what I had.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions, Mike, on what you want?
Would that paperwork go?
Which one?
Did you get it back there? Okay. All right. I don't know.
No,
Well, what the heck did I do that? I might have-
Pass them along to you, it was the state and county.
Oh, there it is.
Phone
Bottom.
please, phone
There you go.
please, phone please. Just one look at it. The state's 8, 10, and 20, so, but I would agree, that was, you know. 10, 12, and 21, how's that?
Sounds good to me.
That's fine with me.
Fine.
Mhm.
So $43?
So we got 10, 12, and 21. So consensus, everybody good?
10, 12, 21.
Yep.
There was a question out there.
Any questions from the audience? For citizens to be heard? Or is it regarding like what we're talking about, or?
I'll come to the next meeting, and then I'm really gonna speak on this overall board approach, okay?
Okay.
I should've got up there now, I was gonna wait till you guys were completely done with this. but I
What-
just- well, it's never positive. It's always negative with you guys. Now, I'm gonna bust a meeting. But I need time to speak at that podium to some of you senior board members, some of you, there's never been a positive change from you guys in this workforce or any department side, the one that I work, in almost 30 years of duty time. It's always, you always pull up shorter comparables. And I know you got comparables that would benefit us in other directions. And I could slap a couple of you guys in the face and drag them in myself, but I won't do that. I never see this board, that's where everybody's on edge around here. And you guys act like this is new stuff. We never beat this village up. Even when I had negotiating rights, I never beat the village up, you guys up.
Gup, if you want to come, like, I mean, you're addressing the policy itself, or just?
I'll back away from it, I'll do it much more professionally the next meeting.
Okay.
But you got the gist of my frustration, Mike, and you know me, and you can cut the attention when we're in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And you know it. I know it. I don't know where it comes from. But you guys know what I'm speaking is the truth. There's no positive here. It's always trying to beat and take away. This stuff was moderate 10 and 12 years ago.
Well, Gup, we can, if you want to revisit, I mean,
I will.
you come into.
You can count on it.
Okay,
It's
all
starting
right.
to wake up some eyeballs here. Everybody's so
All right,
afraid to
let's-
talk to you
Let's,
guys.
we're gonna move along, Gup, and then if you want to come to the next meeting, you're more than welcome, citizens. But recognizing that for the citizens participation, we can't,
I'll do
have the
it
back and forth.
professionally. If I gotta bring some people here, you can bring all the people you want, but man, a couple of you guys need to wake up.
All right, back to page 41. I missed one there. There was a question about 3/4 of the way down the page about the payments for expenses and the IRS regulation. We looked into that. We did remove that language. 46, page 46. I was directed last time to look at some sort of progressive longevity pay. And, because there were some examples of that with some of the comparables, which I did. I'm sorry, forget that. You're right. Longevity pay, the reason I have an arrow there is the board had consensus to leave it the way it was, and I didn't have time to go back through it and remove everything because it's very confusing when we go backwards now. So that was just a note in there that I didn't skip it. But 54 and 55 is what I was referring to for the sick pay payout. That was what I was asked to look at, some sort of the progressive type. And I did put together, I did get 4 of them, I know, so Darren can have one, give one to Jake. You got one. So, there's a lot of numbers on this page, and I'll just walk through it once everybody's got a copy of it. So, what I think Ann had asked me to do is look at a couple of options for, there was a number of the other communities that had, say, at 20 years of service, you get 50%, 30 years of service, you get 100% payout. And I'd been asked to put together some sort of scenarios that way. So if you look at this sheet on the top, basically what it is, all I could do is go back and look at what had been in the past. So the last 12 years, excuse me, from 2007 to 2018, I had data. Actual data for sick time and how much because we have to put it on the books for liability accounts. So in those 12 years, from 2007 to 2018, we had I have these notes are on the bottom there, there's 3 items there. 35 employees left employment with the village in those 12 years. 3 of those employees retired, and 7 of those had more than 10 years of service when they left. So that's kind of what I based everything off of. So if you look at this chart, these employee 1 through 7 are the 7 employees that had more than 10 years of service when they left. And then years of service, their hourly wage, how much sick time they had, and the actual payout column is actually what we paid out as a village under the current policy for people that retired. Okay. Now, the next column was what was kind of proposed in the personnel policy, was saying $70 per day for anyone when they left. That's kind of what we had come up with, saying if they left employment with the village, if they had sick time, they'd get paid $70 a day. So if you look at those 35 employees that left during that time, and what they had accumulated for sick time, the total payout would have been $79,867. And then I divided that by 12 to come up with it per cost per year. So $6,600 it would have cost us, okay? Now, moving on to the next 3 columns are these schedules I put together. So just ignore that for now and look down at the bottom. These are the schedules I came up with, kind of using the comparables as starting points. So at 10 years of service, the Schedule A is 25% payout out to 50 at 30 years. You can kind of follow them. Schedule B is 10 years of service, it would be 35% down to 75, and then so on for C. So does everybody understand that?
Mm-hmm.
So applying that to those same employees that have left, so there's only 7 of them that would have met these schedules, because you have to have 10 years of service under these schedules. So that takes away a lot of the liability. You can see what the payouts would have been for those 7 employees: $43,000, $64,000, $90,000. But obviously the easiest number to look at is the annual cost. So under Schedule A, it's $3,600 a year, and going up from there.
Thank you for putting this together.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's pretty interesting data.
Oh, go ahead, Ann.
Flag up, but,
Go ahead.
this is something that they don't get currently, right? Or that we would, I guess, actual sort of this, so we're moving to, if we went forward with this, we would be moving from this number to one.
Mhm. And keep in mind that if you recall when we discussed this the last time, that it's not all general fund dollars, so to speak. I mean, there is utility money, so it's truly not looking at $875 to $3,600 for the general fund. It's not all, I mean, I would say it's probably 90% of that is general fund.
Well, I guess I want to say something here.
Go ahead, Mike.
Because, I mean, this was, Ann brought this forth, but, just gonna go back, the whole updating personnel policy and this whole manual and stuff. It wasn't, never my intentions to try to increase the benefits. I know we were trying to clean things up, and here we are trying to, I think, negotiate or things. To my knowledge, the board hasn't asked for nothing so far. We're just trying to control the cost. We haven't asked for any takebacks, So I guess we were just gonna clean up the policy and make sure the wording's right, and it makes it hard to negotiate on the floor for benefits and, you know, stuff like that. So that's where I struggle here a little bit. I mean, we're just trying to control the cost, and to my knowledge, you correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't asked for nothing that has a take back. The few things that we, few small items we took in the past, the funeral leave and the flowers thing, you guys put back in, but to my knowledge, we haven't asked for nothing. I'm not prepared to work on this now, but I'll play ball.
And we're not approving this whole policy tonight
No,
or
we're not,
anything,
so
so
I'm
yeah,
just
we
saying
can,
that-
yeah, I mean, we can, you know, everybody needs some time to take all this in also, you know, Randy.
Well, as the newest board member here, looking at this personnel policy, to me, is pretty overwhelming. I mean, I came in, you know, I know we try and limit the amount of discussion to an hour or whatever. I would like to see us, I think, I mean, it's important to go through, but my feeling is that we spend a lot of time on this. Why can't we just devote, and I'm probably gonna shoot myself in the foot, or someone's gonna shoot me in the foot for this, but why can't we come in on a Saturday and really hammer a lot of this stuff out? Instead of spending a Monday night, you know, one meeting a month to try and look at this manual, a chapter or a couple chapters or 3 chapters or 7 chapters. It's a little overwhelming to me. I mean, I read this and I know there's been employees that have gone over this and they've spent a lot of time trying to clean up some of the language, but it just seems to me that there's a lot of information that as a new board member I have to kind of look at, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is what the board has decided that they wanted to do in the past, and if that's the case, that's fine. But it just seems to me that, you know, there's valuable time that we could be discussing other board issues. We've got some things on the agenda tonight that we really need to kind of take a look at. And that's just my piece on this whole policy manual. I'd be willing to come in on a Saturday if we wanted to spend 8 hours here and try and hammer through it. I mean, we are the voice of the taxpayers. I think it's important to go through, but it just seems to me that, you know, we look at that, you know, we got an hour and if we don't get anything done, we just wasted an hour. That's my piece on this plan.
I never looked at it this way, Ann, how do you feel about that? Is that overwhelming for you for this also, or?
I mean, I'm okay with going through it the way we do, but if you wanna look at it one time, that's fine. But I think it's good to look at, like, I agree that it's hard to look at all these individual pieces and make a determination on them, like, of themselves when they're part of the larger compensation package. Like, it seems like it's a compensation, it's these type of decisions, sort of a compensation package thing. And when we do it, these little issues, like, then, I mean, the question is are our employees compensated, you know, fairly with the market? I mean, I guess that's sort of the question. And when we look at each of these pieces individually, I don't think we get that full picture.
Nick?
I guess just to, I mean, generally, I've been involved in this twice now since I've been here, going through this, and both times, the administration, the administrator, along with the department heads, has led the changes, and 90% of this is updating language. 90% of it is. It's stuff's outdated, you know, things don't make sense anymore. Things change, internet policies, things like that. Both times, that's the way it's been done. I think there's obviously, I can understand where you're coming from, Randy, because we've spent hours and hours for the last 8 months going through this as a staff. So I can understand where you're coming from. I think it's the process has to be done at the board level. I think doing it in small chunks at board meetings is easier in some senses, because you can, I need time to go back. That's the other thing, you know, I spend a lot of time putting together comparables and going back and putting things together, and if we're not gonna use them, then, and I don't mean that in any other way, it's just if I'm putting this information together and we're not gonna actually use it, then it's wasting my time. So, yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of time spent on this. But I don't know, the reason I say it is by putting it together in one long day. I just know from going through that here, we've had some long days, you get to a point where you just can't talk about it anymore, and you gotta just take a step back. And then there's, a lot of times things come up, well, we need to look into language for this, or things like that. So I think it's hard to do it all at once.
Yeah, I guess that's the approach that, you know, but this is my second time going through it. That's the approach that we've always done, just the chunks. It's kind of like, you know, I mean, it just seems to just, you know, chipping away at a little bit at a time. Just seemed like the logical way to approach it, you know, just so we could knock out, like Nick is saying, like when we hit, you know, some of these things when we're looking for comparables, and then you come back and you can, you know, knock out a couple of chapters, and then like you revisit, like we're doing tonight, where, you know, I know it seems like we're going backwards a little bit, but we had some lengthy discussions, and we just wanted to have that clarification.
And I'm perfectly fine with the way that we're doing it, but it just seems to me that, you know, as a new board member, I mean, it just seems to me that, and maybe this is my learning process. And like I said, I agree with Nick. I mean, I'm sure a lot of time has been spent on this, but it just seems like, you know, we just need to continue to trudge along, and I, you know, with this.
Mike?
I think we've made some great language changes in here. We've scratched out so much stuff that didn't make sense, and just last time we scratched more, I think it's really positive. The problem is when it comes to the financial thing, when it increased the cost, and we dig in a little bit, and doesn't sit right with everybody. So I mean, if we could just get through the language part without the financial part, we could really make quick work of this policy. But that's where I see we run into roadblocks. That's my 2 cents. And like I said, I think we've made some great changes, and we've cleaned up a lot of good things that were way outdated, and it's a shame to stop now, but it'd be nice to just bypass the financial stuff. That, you know, affects the employees or affects the bottom line of the village, you know. My 2 cents.
Like pull out, I mean, you talk about like pull out anything financial wise, just do that all separately and just knock out the language part, get through it, and then have a meeting where we just concentrate on any numbers or anything like that. And then that way.
How much financial we have left yet? I don't know how much is between this sick leave payout. I mean,
That's pretty much it.
The sick leave could be a big, long discussion. That ain't gonna be decided in this hour here. I think that's a whole separate topic.
And I know how overwhelming it can be, because, I mean, you know, me and Mike obviously been on for a little while longer, so I know what you're, you know, it took me a long time, I mean, you know, a couple of years just to get into that groove and see how things worked and all that stuff,
Sure.
and so, and all of us, I mean, you can call any one of us if you've, you know, and obviously your administrator or any of the board members, if you have a question on anything like that, you know, and also, you know, if you have any questions on anything, how anything works, if it's overwhelming you or anything, you know, because we want you to,
Oh, I just wanna make sure that I understand.
and we're not in a rush, you know, any questions you need to ask, you ask, and we can jump back, because we're just trying to make this first pass through, and I'm sure we're gonna make another, you know, just, does anybody have any outstanding questions, you know, when we do get to that point where we're ready to wrap it up, you know?
And if we get through it, ain't
Mike?
perfect, we could revisit 6 months from now, but it'll be just a small section. We should be able, you know, it shouldn't.
I don't want to start this process.
Yeah,
No, we would-
I
we would
wish
start the whole
Gup
process.
would've stuck around, because, I mean, this is something that, it needs to be done, and like Nick said, this is the second time since you've
Second
been
time
here,
since I've
so
been
it'd be
here.
the second time for me, so, we're doing the best that we can, and, you know, that's why we have Nick getting the comparables, and, you know, Mike was nice enough to get some comparables too. You're trying to get as much information as we can to make this work. It's, you know, I don't know, we're just doing our best. We're trying to represent the taxpayers and the employees, so, I mean, that's all we can do is just do our best and
Okay.
hope we can hammer it out. But,
Well, I guess with that in mind then, I'll just move on to the next one and then we'll have finish up our discussion. Page 55 is the funeral leave. You had asked to remove that one day again, so I took it back out, crossed it out. Correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's taken back out. So that was just, those were just the updates. And as I suspected, it took enough time just to go through that stuff. So I would just say, like, it sounds like the only thing we haven't really resolved at this point is the sick pay. That's the only item, and like you said, Mike, we're through 20 chapters now, and that's only the only item that's still outstanding. So we have made a lot of changes
We
in
have.
progress. So you have the data now for the sick payout, the comparables, you have what I put together for possible scenarios. So I guess whenever we want to discuss that again, and you feel comfortable or want to discuss that again, just let me know and I'll put it back on the agenda. For now, we'll move on then to chapter 21 for the next discussion. Is that the plan? Does that sound okay?
sounds good to me.
I think it gets-
Just let me stroke through, I just had some language stuff, it should be nothing real painful,
On the existing section?
the existing one, just, shouldn't be painful, I wouldn't think, just let me scroll through.
Stuff that was not brought up last time?
Just let me look, just let me make sure that I just have a quick question on 47.
47?
47. You had struck like self-employed individuals may claim a maximum of $20 an hour for reimbursement for, what is that for? That's for, let's say if they got, must be like for fire or something, they did something and maybe a board member or something. If they were self-employed, how would you compensate them? You had scratched it out of self.
The reason for that, I mean, that's outdated for one, but, we would use comparables, or if they could provide us with similar
Types of work.
types of work, yeah, yeah.
I just,
Yep, that seemed a little outdated in there.
I
If somebody's
just was wondering
self-employed
how-
making $35 an hour, it's not fair that they
to
can
be
only
like,
get
it looked like
reimbursed
they
for
were
20.
getting nothing. Say-
No,
Let's say
no.
a police, firefighter was self-employed, he came and responded on his workday.
Yep.
How would you compensate him?
We would, a self-employed person, we would I would first ask them,
Does
Sorry.
that, I mean, is that spelled out in here, or, I mean,
no, it's not, but
I'm just a quick question.
to
You
me,
don't have to answer
that's up
tonight.
to the department head administrator, and if it seems excessive, at that point, you start questioning it.
Okay. Did you think 20 was out of line, or? I mean-
Well, we didn't think why should there be a number in there?
Okay.
I mean, there's certainly people that are self-employed making more than $20 an hour, so that wouldn't be fair to them that
True, I just,
they're only getting
I
20
just asked the question.
So is there anything else regarding policy tonight? Is everybody all right moving on?
Fine, yeah.
All
Is
right.
that, or is everybody okay with what I proposed with going to 21 now and bringing that sick leave
Yeah.
back at whatever point the board would like to?
Yeah.
Yeah, just if the board wants a little time to look at the information that Nick provided for us.
But
And then
this-
we can,
We haven't agreed to all the things in this,
At this
13.
point, there's consensus on all of the items except the sick leave? In my
I
opinion.
wouldn't give you that, so.
well, we're not, I mean, you're talking about the whole policy, right?
Right.
Right. Well, let's just move on, so
Okay.
everybody that, as we get through this,
Fair enough.
when you're reviewing your policy, if you've got anything that comes up again, like I said, we can jump back or forward, whatever. So this is, it's not approved or anything yet, so just so everybody's aware of that,
Okay.
we'll be coming back. So we're gonna start on 21 next time? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mike, could you forward me those items that you think don't have consensus on, just so I
Okay.
can research them if I need to?
I will. Okay.
All right, so that was our discussion on the policy manual tonight. Moving down to item 2, discussion and possible action on review of EMS transport service and staffing of ambulance 502. Now, we've got the information from Jake. Thank you for the information. Nick received an email, and I was CC'd from, obviously Keith isn't here tonight. He would like to be part of the discussion. Would the board care to postpone this discussion, or, so Keith can be a part of that also. Obviously, this is a important item, as is everything, but we would really like to be a part of the discussion, so it's really the board's pleasure if they want to postpone this item until our next meeting, so Keith can be a part of it. Or we can,
Just, I guess I'll add to that, just an FYI, he did email me that, and at it was just 2 weeks ago, he thought he might miss this meeting, and I basically responded to that, and, this is where it becomes a little gray as to who can remove and add items to the agenda, but I basically responded to him saying, I'll leave it on the agenda, and if you're not there, then the board would likely postpone it, so I was hoping that it would be postponed, because he asked, otherwise I would have removed it from the agenda, because he was maybe gonna be here, that's why I put it on, because in case he showed up, so.
so what is the board's pleasure? Would they like to postpone this so we can have a full board and have the discussion? Ann?
Do I need to make a motion?
Well,
I'm
just-
fine with postponing it if he asked. if
Can
it
I-
would be included, I guess, why would we not?
I would maybe just propose, if we have any questions that maybe Jake could follow up on.
Sure.
We want to make a decision, and I just throw a few
Right.
questions.
It's a good
to him
idea.
that
Yeah, we can
provide some-
absolutely
maybe
start
not
this
make a-
discussion.
Maybe make a
That's fine.
discussion.
Absolutely.
and
Okay with that.
you know,
Absolutely, okay. And then, just so we're not gonna make any decisions tonight, but we'll start the discussion. Everybody fine with that? Okay. Mike, did you wanna start out, or did you?
No, I had my flame left over from
Okay.
last time, yeah.
Jake, do you wanna start us off on
Yeah, I can.
what we're doing here?
I was just gonna say, because I thought it was gonna be postponed too, that if you wanted to review the, information, I and Nick, we worked together on this sheet, that we compiled, to let me know. If you go to the 502 expenditures and revenue sheet, we took the numbers, some of the numbers for the number of runs received each month for the first 6 months of the year, and that is going to be your first 2 or 3 rows. After there, we put salaries, subscriptions, vehicle maintenance, and then what we decided on for parts and equipment, that's a year-to-date number, and then depreciation, so mileage, we came down to 24 cents it was. I rounded it to 25 cents. We've spent roughly 6,000 on the vehicle year-to-date, so kinda took that from maintenance costs that obviously make the vehicle depreciate. Came up with $1,500 for an expense. The bottom box kinda gives you an overview of the total charges that we have given out with that ambulance, the revenue. So we have a collection rate of 47%, and then you can see the expenses and then the net revenue at the bottom there. So it's a pretty basic sheet, I guess, layout. We have quite a few at this point of non-responses due to either staffing after hours or just the one that, or 2 that 500 was out on 911 calls. Everything else has been pretty good. July was kind of a slower month, but if you watch our runs and whatnot, and I'm sure you know this, Randy, one month you can go down and then the next month you can go up. Now it's kinda, you see 911's super high and interfacility's low in one month, and the next month it's a little bit different, So actually, in July, it was our 3rd highest for the year for runs. I think we had 68 or 69. So it was actually more than the previous 2 months. So it's staying, pretty much level. We're still projecting 750, 800 runs this year. So which is quite a few more than normal.
Randy?
Yeah, thank you. So, 750 to 800, those are 911 calls? Or is that
It's
just?
everything
It's
combined.
everything?
Yeah, 500,
Okay.
502 combined.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, when you entered into this, into the transport, component of this, the village board, they were gonna review this at the 1 year mark to see if this was a viable,
Correct. Yeah, if it was
Okay.
self-sustaining is how I understood it.
right. My question is what is MSAC's, how are they feeling about it?
Pretty
you
much
had
the
any-
same where it is, as long as it's self-sustaining, they
Okay.
don't have any issues. We had a meeting, it would have been in July on the 19th, I believe. And that was the consensus that, you know, if it's maintaining itself, I invited them to this board meeting. So I'll update them, let them know that it got pushed off to the 20th, as far as making a decision, if they'd like to come.
And I guess my next comment is that with the staff that you have here during the day, those folks that are staffing 502, they're cross-trained, is that correct?
Yep,
So that's helping out the fire department on the fire side also.
tremendous.
That apparatus is getting out the door in
Yeah.
a timely manner. And then also, by having that staff here, the EMS is not relying on the city to take calls, I guess, like another
Yeah,
ambulance
yep,
call,
yeah.
another ambulance call. So primarily, the 502 is a 911 backup to 500.
Yeah,
They'll,
yep, so,
they will do a 911 call versus the interfacility
Yeah.
transport. That's the priority.
yeah, yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you can see on the fire response times, the difference in, I guess, minutes it takes to staff a vehicle and get it out the door. What that means is during the staffed hours, it takes 1.75 minutes to get out the door. That's our en route time, and then unstaffed is just over 5 minutes. So, you know, you're talking 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. 50 or a majority of the time, people have to come from home and respond down to the station. They're paid on call, as you guys all know, and that's how long it takes for them to get down here and respond in a vehicle. So, which is still pretty quick if you think about it. And I know Randy has experience in it where people got to come from home and get in their vehicle and so on and so forth. So,
Mike?
Okay, I'm looking at the 502 expenditures and revenues.
yep,
April, you had 68 hours overtime,
yep.
and what happened there?
Most likely it was due to people being in school.
And this is just for
So-
502, right?
Yep.
Okay. The bonuses, how's those bonuses work? I know we approved like a month or so ago of some bonuses, but I see them way back to February, so what's the story with those?
Those have been in the union contract, and they were all brought forward, to get approved.
Refresh my memory.
What that means is from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and on the weekends, if we get an interfacility transport, which it happens quite often, especially as of late, they get a bonus for coming in. So there's an incentive there for them to come in for the transport. So it was 25, and then with the last union contract that was passed, it went to 50.
We just increased that, that's what we did, a month or
Correct,
two ago,
yeah.
right? Okay,
Mhm.
that's, okay, now that makes sense to me, okay. When we figured the costs for employees, for labor, did we figure the cost of
FICA
villages?
and WRS.
Villages, part of the Medicare and
Yep.
Social
Yeah,
Security?
everything's in there.
I had Jake presented this to me a couple weeks ago, and then I went through it and had him add a few things, and then I gave it to Chris, and she made sure all the wages and the FICA, the retirement, all that stuff is included in
Both sides
those
of it.
full-time employees.
Yeah.
The part-timers, they don't have it.
But both sides of it, look, we
Yeah.
don't pay the employee.
No,
duh.
just the village side.
We don't do that anyway, so
Just the
thank you.
village side.
Okay, yep, okay, I'm good, thank you.
Ian?
So for these collections, so in June, there's $14,000, is that how much we collected on June? And potential for us to collect more on June because of, as time goes by, or is that?
Correct. So if I'll explain this first page like I should have done. If you look at the charge report, that's at 104,062.29. If you take the $58,000 that is at our collection rate away from that, we have outstanding amounts, I guess, sitting out there all the time between both ambulances. And that would be, so like roughly just over $45,000 is out there that potentially could be collected. Now, sometimes if somebody is deceased or if somebody is unable and files bankruptcy, we're not gonna get any money from that. But that money, that $45-ish thousand is out there that we potentially could collect. We took the amount, the $25,000, and that's based off of our charge reports that we get, and to get the best number that we possibly can for the last 6 months, we took it times our collection rate, and that's where we got the 58,795.
Okay, so that's 47, it's like the 47% of
Yeah.
145. So we
Yep.
didn't necessarily collect all that money, put it away,
Correct.
we didn't.
Yeah.
Okay,
We
but there's
spent-
not potential really to get much more than that if you're using the average collected.
Right.
Correct.
And, sorry to interject, Dan, but Jake and I spent a lot of time talking about that specific item, because there's collection, we can look at the collection, but
Right.
it could be from 6-8 months ago.
Yep, yep,
So,
yep.
we think that that's the most accurate way to look at it.
And then I just wanna ask about depreciation again, one time.
Yep.
Go over, I mean, does that, I guess, you buy a ambulance and it lasts for a certain amount of time, does
Yep.
that's what you're considering?
Yeah, yep, and we actually had the state inspector in here last week. Both ambulances did very well. We had a license plate light out on 502, and then a dim light out inside the cab that they both got replaced and fixed, so everything was kosher there, essentially before he had left the building. But I asked him what he sees ambulances at, because this guy inspects all the ambulances pretty much in the state of Wisconsin. And he said, depending on call volume, so on and so forth, he's seen ambulances close to 200,000 miles on them. We had found out in the background, actually the analysis of the front sheet, we're roughly averaging 5,900 miles, so like 6,000 miles a year with 502 currently. 500 is actually up to like 8,500 miles the last 2 years, which is quite a bit. 502, our old one, was at like 3,000 miles, so obviously we just about doubled that with the current 502, and that's obviously because of the interfacilities. So if you think at the 8-year mark, 10-year mark of replacing one of the vehicles, we'd be looking at 150 or so thousand miles, which isn't too bad if the vehicle's maintained well and, the equipment's taken care of, so. I don't think that that ambulance will have an issue lasting that long. So, and I've talked to some guys that work on other departments, and they see pretty much the same thing, where an ambulance is going to 140, 150,000 miles. And, there are maintenance issues, and that's obviously something that we will continue to look at with the vehicles and see if there's a huge influx in it, but I've been told from, people that work on the vehicles, it's better to have the vehicle out and running than sitting. You lose a lot of seals and whatnot with that, so.
So Randy, when you replaced an ambulance, what was your determination? Was it mileage, or was it nickel and diamond, or what was the average? Do you remember what the average mileage when you would replace an ambulance?
I think you gotta look at the big picture. I mean, maintenance issues, I think that's a big thing.
Not necessarily mileage, just. how
No,
it's
I
running
think
and
it's
all
just
that.
maintenance,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, clearly the vehicles they're, the box itself is gonna last, the box itself, that's why a lot of departments are doing remounts versus buying, the remounting, because the box itself is manufactured in such that they're lasting a long time. When you look at a remount, they basically gut the whole thing.
Yeah.
They will pull wires and rewire and things like that. You're just taking that box and remounting it on a chassis. not saying that that's the route to go. I'm just saying what I've read, a lot of departments have, even in the valley, that's the route that they've gone.
I did add too in the analysis portion, some things that the guys are doing during the day. I can bring an example on the 20th. I have had since January or February, duty log that each daily duty officer fills out for me. It gives me a little bit of information on what they did during the day. The fact that vehicle checks are getting done, if there's any maintenance on the vehicles, incidents that they responded to, fire, EMS, so on and so forth. We've started doing a lot more continuing ed a little bit differently for EMS refreshers, so they are more involved with doing some work on Fire Rescue Academy 1, which is a computer program, and it's like 45-minute training, so sometimes you may see the guys sitting in front of a computer, and that's most likely what they'll be doing. Adam and I assign 2 different trainings in a 2-week period, so each person has to spend about an hour and a half in front of a computer screen going through the training, and those hours count towards the biannual refresher. So that's kind of where we went at with that. We've updated a lot of the paperwork that's inside of the vehicle, so like map books, pre-plans for structures, getting the protocol books up to date, and all that kind of stuff. So those people are staying quite busy. Our guys, when I came in today at like a little after 5, they were still over here working in the station, so they're staying busy. A lot of times, 2:30ish, the crew will go work out at the station. That's worked into their union contract, or at the high school, that's worked into their contract. They're there for an hour and a half. It's somewhat mandatory that they go. If they're not going to the gym, then they are to like work out. They're gonna be at the gym up on a treadmill walking or doing something to keep their physical activity up and ready to go, so they're staying busy. Most of our mornings, especially with all the new people, Monday and Wednesday we did fire training, so we were down at the Village Garage Monday, and then Wednesday we were up in Van Dyne doing some search and rescue and hose advancements at their building that they have, so we're staying busy during the day.
Just one quick question. You don't
Mike?
have to respond. I hope that you reach out to other departments, and if there's anything that your department could help another department out with some tasks that they don't get tied up with, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we do a lot of
I hope
that.
I mean,
We've
for all
kind
the
of,
departments of the village here, that would pay off, okay.
as in other departments in the village?
I mean, maybe,
Or like,
Public Works or PD or the front office or courts, I don't know, I mean, you work through your administrator here, but I hope that we reach out to other areas that there's some tasks that your crew.
And we do that. I mean, they put together a bunch of chairs they do
Perfect.
duties like that for us all the time.
Perfect, okay. Reach out.
How many chairs did you guys put together in the last month?
a couple.
Yeah.
Perfect, yeah, thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions for Jake? If not, the board wants to postpone this till our next meeting, and that way Keith can jump in if he's got any questions, and then we can make that decision what we need to do. So we will postpone it. Everybody good? And no
Yeah, I'm fine
questions?
with- I'm
All right.
fine with that.
Everybody good? All right. Moving down to number 3, discussion and possible action on 2019 overlay program contract.
It's provided in your packet, the background by Mitch. We had one bid. We had this dilemma last year. I won't even call it a dilemma at this point. Construction is very busy right now, so I wasn't surprised by it, along with, there's not a lot of asphalt contractors. Specifically in this area, we have one that does this larger, but we still see some of the other ones there's one Green Bay and one down Milwaukee that usually will bid, but we only had one bid. Our estimate for the work is on the second page. If you look at the NFDL estimate, there's kind of a couple columns. You go all the way down to the bottom. It was $175,000. It did come in a little bit above the estimate at 188. However, we had budgeted 223. So we're well within the budget. We're actually $35,000 below budget, and we feel that this is a competitive price. Part of the reason that the estimate's probably a little low is recently fuel prices have gone up, and so has asphalt has gone up significantly over the last, and Darren can attest to that, over the last month or two probably. So we feel good about this, and we would recommend approval.
Any questions or comments? Alrighty. So we need I'll make a motion that we approve the 2019 overlay program contract. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Motion by Streeter, second by Randy, to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Discussion of staff reports at village board meetings.
This is something I put on the agenda. I had my training a couple weeks ago for clerk training, and part of that process, it was a great training, a long training, but part of that process was talking about Robert's Rule of Order and board meetings and closed sessions and a lot of that information. And the specific item of staff reports on board agendas came up, and really the way, from a public notice standpoint, generally speaking, things that are on your agenda should have some specific items on them. So for instance, the example we got from the person teaching the course was, if you're gonna do staff reports, it should, for example, should say Public Works Department staff reports, and then underneath that should say update on Illinois Street, number 2, update on water main break. The reason for that is you're really not noticing the public about what you're speaking about, and we've seen it here in the past where all of a sudden that staff report leads into budget discussion, and you're really not noticing the public about that. So I just wanted to have that discussion. There's a couple options as I see it. We can just remove them. In a way, we send out the weekly reports in email format to everyone, and then we read them to you again on Monday, so it's kind of, I understand there's the viewing public too, which is generally very few. The other option we have is to continue to do it as it is, which I wouldn't recommend. I think there could be some issues there, possibly, if somebody brought up issues. And I think the other option we have is if we want to continue to do some sort of a report, we would really have to direct staff to just, really minimize their reports to, hey, Darren tells me, I really would like to update the board on a water main break we had, so we put it on the agenda. Or I'd like to let the public know we're doing this, and we put it on the agenda as that. So it's just, at this point, we don't need to necessarily make a decision tonight. I mean, we could make a decision. I mean, if you look around, I've looked around at a lot of agendas, there are still some. Most agendas, what they do is they accept the staff reports. They don't read them, they just accept them. That's it. So you would accept the weekly report from staff, and that's it.
Anybody want to weigh in on
I've seen
how
it where
they feel about the weekly reports?
I see that they provided a written report, like you said, and then they go over the highlights of it, for that report, at the committee or the board level, and you're right, they just accept it, and we don't even do that now, we don't accept the report, so
Right.
that's all I gotta say.
Randy, any comments or? Yeah. I mean, I like the weekly, I like that portion of the agenda, just give people, especially like library, and the police department gives like an update, and fire, everybody, I like that, but, I understand what you're saying. I don't know how you could make that, I don't know.
So what would you do? Would you not have a department that's here unless there was something on the agenda for them?
Well, certain department heads I think would always still be here. I would suggest that we would still have Public Works and Fire, EMS, and Police. Those are generally have discussion items about budgets or items. They're not just, hopefully they're not here for the whole board meeting just to give their weekly report. Otherwise, why are we requiring them to be here? So the ones that are required to be here as part of their job descriptions, I would still require to be here.
But if there's nothing on the agenda that's for the department, I don't know, could they weigh in on that? I don't know, I don't know. I understand if there was something about a street reconstruction, we would want Darren here, but if there's nothing with Public Works, I guess I don't see it, so.
So do you like suggesting, like, if those items need to be on there, that we would just require them to be there, or, I mean, you know, because we have that worked in where they get a little compensation time for
Mhm.
doing that.
I personally think that the department heads that are required to be here already should continue to be required here, because there's cross-departmental stuff that gets discussed. Sometimes when the fire department's talking about something, it relates to the police department, and when, from a staff level, from an administrator, you want your department heads to kind of be on the same page, the ones that are generally, you know, involved in those discussions, so. It wasn't the discussion, I guess, it was more about the weekly reports. I wouldn't change anything else, I don't think, about who would be in attendance, unless there's certain people that come here just to give their weekly report. Those people, obviously, those department heads probably wouldn't have to come to the meeting anymore if we didn't do weekly reports.
So you just want to discuss this tonight, no decision really
Well,
been made? Or
I have
anything?
it discussion and, no, it's just discussion. I mean, there's really no action. If the board decides that we should just take it off, we'll just take it off. There's not any action, because this really isn't an action item. I mean, how the agenda's put together isn't
Yeah.
necessarily an action item.
Gotcha.
Excuse me, make a motion.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I do like it when they report to us, and, I mean, there's a few that come, but, you know, if someone does come, they can pick up something, but why don't we try that, they can pinpoint a few items that they wanna speak on the report or something. Just try it, I mean, it's, this way they can stay to those items, I don't know, I'm just throwing out, I do like it, I want us to try to be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, like we're talking about, like, for the weekly report, we know what people are really gonna say. So, I mean, they could just put a couple things on their update on, like you said, maybe a street project, or, you know, Darren's gonna talk about, winter parking coming up, or whatever, you know, I mean, we could try that, I mean, if that covers what your training was talking about.
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
that
just
would,
so
like,
it's-
something like that would be covered under announcements, probably, winter parking. It's just when we get into specific, you know, we start talking about, we're doing this on Indiana Avenue, and we found bad base, so we're gonna have to look at undercutting that. Well, that's, all of a sudden, I just started a budget discussion, and that's the issue.
I mean, go ahead, Ann.
Well, are you recommending that you would summarize the staff reports on the agenda then, instead of just writing the
My,
staff reports?
my recommendation is just take them off completely, and if we wanna hand them out we can make our staff reports available to the public. We can hand them out at the back table, you can accept the report for the week preceding at the board meeting if you would like, and we can also start sending it out with the board packets to that distribution list, cause we have a distribution list of people in the village that get that. And if people want copies of those staff reports, they can ask to get added to that list.
I don't know, I like what we do. I mean, we just have to be careful that we don't get into a budget discussion, or, you know, I mean, typically, we don't, from what I recall, but I mean, I know what you're saying, you know, occasionally, you know, a question might come up and we delve into that, but, I mean, for me, I really like, I know it's a little redundant, we get the staff report, but I think it's helpful for audience members or whoever's out there watching. I know it's few, but, you know, there are a few out there that do watch.
No, again, I'm gonna win, I do like it, and it's just one more opportunity for people to get information about the village. I understand your concerns about going off in a certain direction, but I don't know, maybe we can talk about it, maybe we can shape this thing that'll make it work, I don't know, so. It's just one more opportunity for the public to know what's going on in the village, so.
Anybody else wanna weigh in, Randy, or do you like the staff reports on there, or?
I like it. You know, noticing there are some departments that do not, on the weekly report, they don't add, you know, there's, so, you know, if we were to take this off, I guess then I would like to have each department have, you know, something in there. There are some departments that, you know, that don't put anything in there, but, doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I'm happy
Okay.
with the way it is, and, you know, if you wanted to try it, we can experiment for a little bit and see how it goes. You can always, you know, add it back on, I would assume.
Ann, any
I like
preference?
to have it too, I guess.
Okay.
I like to put a face to the
So consensus, everybody's okay leaving it on there? We just need to be careful that we don't delve into that.
Let's try to
Problem that
reshape
we-
it if we can, let's try to reshape it and make it, legal,
All right. Moving down to number 5, discussion on board meeting the week of September 3rd.
That's Labor Day, so I believe that's Labor Day.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
So either possible dates would be the 4th, I suppose, or the 10th. I don't know if anybody, didn't sound like that was a good
That's my birthday.
guess. Oh, well,
Fourth
then
or the
we'd have
10th?
cake.
Does anybody have any preference? And either day that,
Either day's fine. Actually,
You
I
sure?
would prefer the 10th.
you guys okay with the 10th? It's just the following Monday.
I might be late
Would you go
at
back
that
to
meeting.
back then?
10th and the 17th.
Yeah, you're going back to back then,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
I might be late on the 10th. I have another meeting at 5:15, so I might be a few minutes late. Whatever works.
I'm open either one.
I'm fine
Yeah, I'm
with the
fine
10th.
with the 4th too, so whatever.
The 4th is fine.
4th?
4th is fine.
Yep, it's fine.
Board's pleasure, whatever
I
you
think
guys
the
want to,
4th.
either one works for me.
Let's try the 4th and we'll.
4th?
Fourth.
4th? 4th?
How about Nick, how's it work for you?
Whatever the board wants.
All right, September 4th it is.
It's Ann's birthday and she didn't have any pull, so.
I'm gonna put cake in parentheses, so just so we. Alrighty. Moving down to item 6, discussion on 5-year capital improvement plan for 2019 budget and budget process.
All right, before we get into that detail, I just want to give kind of an overview of how I want to approach the budget, and you can open up to your binders that I handed out. On the first page is kind of the schedule of what we're hoping to do, which is going to look pretty similar to what we did in the past, except maybe a little bit more spread out, starting maybe a little bit earlier. What I would like to do is start with the CIP tonight, and then on August 20th, have the fire EMS, police, fire, and EMS do their budget. And you'll see September 4th, see, I guessed right, board review, administration, and courts. And then on September 17th, public works and library. And then the 1st of October, we would have continued board review. So it's a little bit different maybe than we've done it in the past. And what I'd like to do is look at the budget without in mind, keep just kind of forgetting about the revenues. And just, let's look at the budget and what we were proposing to do, what services we're providing, and let's go through the entire budget process. And, you know, obviously, we're gonna look at what we spent last year, that's part of it. But just get through that, because that's part of the problem, is trying to cram it in at the end, is because we're waiting on revenue, we're waiting on shared revenue, we're waiting on tax levies, numbers and all, and credits and all this stuff, so we kinda have to, at the last minute, we kinda have to throw everything together. So what I'd like to do is just go through the entire budget process, just kind of a one run through each department. The board can weigh in on, well, you know, maybe the police department's proposing X, and the board says, well, we don't really wanna do X. So that you can have that discussion without really attaching dollars to it. There'll be dollars in there, obviously, but without knowing at that point, can we afford it or not, we won't know that, okay? So we'll get through all that, and then at the end, we will have, at that point, we'll have our revenue numbers, and we'll say, okay, this is what we proposed. Hopefully, we say, based on our numbers, it looks like this is all gonna work. It's a 1% tax rate increase, and the board's fine with that. Or we come and say, well, actually, we're about $50,000 short. These are the items we propose to cut. And the board's already familiar with the items because you've already discussed them. So that's the approach I'd like to take this year. But what that does is it spreads it out a little bit, so we don't have to have one or
Everybody
two
on the same
nights
night.
where we just cram budget, and 'cause sometimes that gets to be overwhelming, I think. Now, that's my intention, and hopefully we can follow through this process and make all these dates work. But that's what I'd like to do. So tonight starts the 5-year CIP plan review. So is the board okay with that approach? Okay. So, flipping to the next page then, this is looking at the 2018 CIP, which was approved last year. If you recall, there's a 2-year borrow. We always typically do 2-year borrows for our CIP. There was a borrow done in late 2017 for 2017 and 2018. The borrowed amount for 2018 was $62,487. You'll see that number on the bottom in the first two columns. And the third column is actually what's been spent year to date, 286,000, and then we have an estimated actual, which we feel is very close to what it's probably gonna be. So you see, we're only gonna probably spend about $746,000 of that. So we're gonna have about $116,000 that's gonna go back into capital reserves, which will basically minimize our borrowing the next time we borrow, which will be at the end of 2019 for 19 and 20. So that's good news. The majority of it, just to highlight those, what kind of made up those big savings, you'll see the refuse truck, that Public Works vehicles, it was $258,000 was budgeted. We're estimating 223, I'm sorry. That the garbage truck's only gonna cost about $195,000 instead of the $230, and that's made up of a number of things. It's cheaper because Darren found a demo model that saves quite a bit. And there was 28,000, if you recall, a while ago, we started putting reserve money away from the garbage can charges. Do you remember that? I think, Mike, it was your suggestion. So the utility bills were getting charged when there was garbage can charges on utility bills. We started putting that money in a reserve account. There's a total of, which we stopped doing once we went back to the $5 charge because it was kind of pointless. But there's $28,250 in that reserve account. I'm sorry, that's not right. It's around $28,000. That's a pickup truck. It's around $28,000. So that's part of the savings. A big savings too was Indiana Avenue. Below that, it was we budgeted $200,000. It was really only $163,000. And then the overlays that we just talked about, we budgeted $239,000, and with parking lot maintenance and that, it's probably gonna be closer to $205,000. So those are where we saw the savings, and has been a little typical lately, which is a good thing, I suppose. Are there any questions on that? So then moving in, the next 10 or 11 pages, I think it's 11 pages, is the proposed 5-year CIP. All of the departments came to me with all of their requests. We put everything in here. Really the focus on that first page, what I really focus in on and what we should focus in on is that the bottom section of the page, it says deed loan capital projects. That's what we end up having to borrow for. So in the past, we've always tried to maintain about a $700,000 a year debt service, around that $600,000 to $800,000 debt service annually. And if you think about that, by borrowing about $700,000 a year, you're gonna maintain that because we get very low interest rates. And we always have been doing 10-year notes. So we always try to be probably between 1.2 to 1.5 or 6 for our 2-year borrows. So that's $600,000 to $850,000 annually, where we try to keep that capital around. That keeps our debt service where we want it to be. So if you look at this 2019, we're at $769,000. The largest purchase in there is the fire response vehicle at $650,000. So that's a big item, obviously. Out of 769, it was actually higher than that. It was 850 or so, and I didn't feel quite comfortable with that. So we moved our overlays. We felt comfortable moving our overlays around a little bit, so we only are putting in like 39,000. We can get into that detail later, but that's really the number we try to focus in on, is that capital loan amount. So if you see, we're at 769, 701, 652, and then you see 2022 drops off pretty significantly, and 2023 drops off pretty significantly. Now, keep in mind that other things come up, and as we get there, I expect those numbers to grow. So, with that, is there any questions on that first page? And flipping to the next page, it's a really great page. One thing I'll just say, that the copier here is on this page. It likely will be added somewhere down in this 2022, 2023. I'm kind of waiting to hear back from MBM on that. But it's not a large expense. And then you get into the facilities, and there's really nothing new here. Darren would be in charge of this if Darren wants to go through it, or if, I don't know, do you guys want to go through this step by step, or you want to just ask questions when you have questions about certain sections?
Whatever the pleasure is. Something comes up. Yeah, just.
I have one thing to say on this.
Okay.
If you look in 2020, $75,000 for the pool, about the middle of the page.
Yeah.
That's for recoating the pool surface of the main pool. We're starting to wear it thin in some areas. The pool surface is about 12 years old right now, and 10-year life expectancy, so we've exceeded it already. But putting that in there, we did some patching on it this past year. Patching's holding up okay, but it's just gonna continue. That's why in 2020 I added that, and that's a quote from a pool company. They'd come in and strip back down the bare concrete again, and then replaster the whole pool, including, or up to the tile line and the gutters.
Any cracks or anything that you gotta deal with?
Yeah, we're having some cracking. We patched some of that, but this would be taking care of, the $75,000 takes care of repairing all the cracks. So that's one thing that I added in that wasn't in last year's capital.
Any questions on the facilities? If not, we can flip 2 pages, because the next page is basically just a summary of that. And then, the page, should be page 5 on the bottom, we have parks. Pretty simple on the top there, we do the chips on the, and Darren, I can let you take that, the chips on the playgrounds and
Yeah,
the,
playground chips. We put the new monument up, and we had talked in the office about flagpoles behind it. So I didn't wanna add any more capital to 19, but I'm putting it out there for 2020 to add some flagpoles behind the monument. We're still gonna do the lighting of the monument this year, but we would put the wiring in at the same time to run lights up to the flagpoles that I proposed to put in 2020. And then also, you'll see I did add in 2019, we had the problem with the NEV this year. We've got it working again, but we're not gonna use it for what we were using it for. It just puts too much load on the motors. We're doing our spraying and stuff with it, and pulling that spraying trailer is just too much load for an electric vehicle. So what I'm proposing is selling it and buying, kinda like what the school's using, one of those Cub Cadets or a John Deere Gator. It would be a gas-powered utility with a dump bed, type vehicle to replace the NEV. I've had conversations with Darren Pouch. The NEV is street legal. The Cub Cadet that the school is using and stuff like that is not street legal, but as long as we stay on residential streets, not on Prospect, and follow some of those rules, we're kind of exempt from traffic. It would be a slow-moving vehicle, not one of these side-by-side UTVs that do 60 miles an hour. It'd be a utility one that does 10 to 15 miles per hour. But that would be more than capable of pulling our spray rig and stuff like that.
I just thought about this, it's unrelated to what he's talking about, but when I mentioned earlier about kind of forgetting about revenues at this point, that doesn't really apply to capital, because capital is, we borrow for it and we're trying to shoot for that 7. So if you do have, in going through the entire budget, but for this, we really aren't gonna come back to this to say we don't have enough money to do this because it's a borrow. You know what I'm saying? So the debt service, we have that kind of planned out for the next 20 years. So, not that you can't come back and say, I don't agree with this, it's just that this isn't going to be, there really isn't anything in here that's gonna, when we come back and say, hey, our revenues are a little bit lower, that doesn't really apply to this, so to speak.
Just a flagpole thing, you always usually do approach optimists, maybe.
Yeah.
they would
Yeah,
probably
I put it,
yeah.
I put that in here to earmark some money. If I don't get any funding, if I go approach other places, I'm gonna solicit funding for someone else to pay for it rather than village. But earmark it for 2020 as a goal to meet that, and if I get some funding other places, this number's gonna drop.
More questions on that? Okay, the next page, and Darren had a conference, so I do have some background on this if there is questions, but it's the squad car replacement. It's his typical, I think he's a 4-year replacement on the ones that are out on the road all the time, and this is his replacement. As you can see, it's pretty much 30 to 40,000. That 1 year's a little higher because there's two vehicles in 1 year, so. And then moving down, I just want to touch base on the equipment. The squad video cameras were in the budget, and so were the MDCs. Now, the MDCs, I think I have a handout for that, I apologize here, somewhere. The MDCs, they've always had Tough Books, and those are the computers that are in the squad cars. They've always used Panasonic Tough Books, and there's a new, and I'll hand this out. He did a little write-up for it tonight. There's a new computer out there, but it's called a Rhino Tab, so it's a tablet. It has a separate keyboard, but it's more of a tablet than it is a computer. And the advantage of it, just for practicality, is you can mount. You have a little more flexibility on where you mount the screen and the keyboard. And if you've seen the way their Tough Books are mounted in there now, it kind of takes up a lot of space in the middle. So that's one advantage. But the main advantage is that they rebuild them. Like our Panasonic Tough Books, they use for 4 or 5 years. They throw them away. They buy new. They don't throw them away, but they usually don't get much for them at all, if anything. And they buy new ones. This Rhino Tab, it has the opportunity to kind of rebuild. So they send it in after 4 years, and it gets rebuilt. And I think he had said 7 years. And next week he's doing his full budget, or next board meeting on the 20th. He's going to do his general fund budget. So if there's real specific questions, he can get into more details on this. But basically, he was budgeting for 2018. He had budgeted $15,696, and I think the cost was, I want to say it was closer to 22. It was maybe $7,000 more. But he feels in the long run it's going to be a cheaper process and more user friendly. The other advantage of it is they can take it out of the squad, do the reports. They can take pictures with it. They can take video with it. They can take it onto the crime scene. So it's more than just being more practical in the car. So that's the overview of it. You got the write-up, and he can explain further details next board meeting. So any other questions on that page, on page 6? No? All right.
Spend that money this year then? Talking about 18 million.
Correct. He would like to spend that this year, and as you know from our earlier discussions, I had already told him that if the board so chose to go that route and he wanted to go that route, there's definitely available funds this year. We saved a lot of money in other areas, so it would be a good year to do that if you want to overspend it a little bit. So. The next page, obviously, is the large item we had talked about in 2019, and then Jake can discuss that.
So 2019 would be the engine replacing what is currently 503. So 504 would move over to that location and be our second out, and we would have a new 504. If that makes sense.
Randy?
Jake, in the past, when you bought apparatus, it was on you paid so much per year. It was like, I don't know, how did that, refresh my memory?
They were on a 10-year plan, I believe, right, Chuck?
Okay.
So we replaced every 20, and then, so 510 and 504 were the past 10 years, and then 503 was the years,
So
10 years
you're not
prior.
proposing that, to do that again, is that correct?
That is correct. It would be the,
We'd still be purchasing, we'd still be borrowing the money. It'd still be a payment plan.
Okay.
It's, I think in the past, what you remember is there was actually a payment in the capital budget every year of $33,000.
Yeah.
I think that was actually for an ambulance though, wasn't it, or was it?
No,
fire
that
truck?
was for no, it was for 510.
So I think
The
that
rest,
was,
for the rescue, and
probably
There's two
504.
vehicles, right?
but that was a program, right?
Really both.
Was that like a program through the company or something where we were making that payment? It wasn't a debt
Oshkosh
service payment.
Capital.
Yeah, it wasn't a debt service
Okay.
payment where, and we're still looking into that with Ellers as our financial people
Okay.
that we use. There is possibly a cheaper financing route than borrowing to the general fund
Okay.
just for that single purchase.
Okay.
And we're looking into that.
all right, thank you.
Mike?
Let's just follow up on that. I mean, the Skyler packs are all a long way, so we got time to to do our research to try to find some funding for that, and I think last time, I think you got 90,000, I can't remember the gentleman's name that,
Was it
Paul.
Greg? Paul.
I think
Paul Nelson.
I think he got like 90 grand that time or something for Scott.
I'd assume it was more than that, but.
Maybe
yeah,
it was
we have-
more than that.
We have MSAs right now, they have a 15-year life expectancy, so by the end of 2020 is when they would be, or 2021, I apologize, is when they would be expired. So we would purchase them and get them for 2022.
And Jake, just explain a little bit, because I had talked to Jake about, well, there's how many, there's 27?
25.
25? I said, well, can we do 5-year for 5 years and spread it out a little bit and explain the answer to that?
Yeah, not only is the technology different, but the face pieces have a specific connection to them. So we have to fit test everybody and make sure that the face piece seals on their face, and we can't have one type of air pack with one specific face piece in one vehicle and then another air pack with a different face piece in another vehicle, because it wouldn't work out. So, and everyone currently is assigned a mask. They're not specifically assigned an air pack because they're in each vehicle. So that would be impossible to do. If that makes sense.
But if I remember correctly, I mean, some of those grants, if you have it budgeted into the upcoming year, they won't even look at you. So that's what I'm saying, if we start looking now, maybe we replace it
If it's an
sooner.
approved budget.
If it's approved, I'm just saying, if we start looking now, maybe we can get them with some grant money, we can maybe replace them sooner. and
Yeah,
have
I'm
some
not gonna not
compensation.
try for a
I'm
grant.
just saying,
You know,
we have
we
a lot
have-
of time here, so.
Yeah,
let's-
we
let's use
currently
it.
have the grant out for the exhaust system
Yep.
in the bay. We haven't heard anything back on that yet, but not to get off topic, we do plan on writing for them, in the coming years. Cause it's technically not an approved, budget item at the moment.
In, sorry, Jake, remind me, was it 2020, I believe, is when actually the 15 years is up?
2021.
2021. So what we did is I had mentioned earlier that you saw the drop off in 2020. We bumped it out to 2022 because originally that had like a $220,000 total in it. So that's when we put it there, even though they're going to be 1 year past their useful life. But Jake didn't see that to be an issue. More questions on that? There's really nothing on the next page besides current year. There's a blank page apparently in there. Does everybody have a blank page? Oh, just me. I'm the lucky one. And then page 9 is really mostly Darren, all the public works stuff.
And that starts out with the refuse truck. It's replacement of a patrol truck that I had scheduled for 2019 that we moved back a year to clean up some money in 2019, so we moved that patrol truck out to 2020. Street sweeper replacement, I received some news on that. Last week, I had 190,000
190.
in there, and I found out the price of it is going to be substantially more. But I did receive the phone call today that I have a guy bringing me a demo on Wednesday to look at, that'll be available for sale next year. So I could save a little bit of money.
Can I just interject here? When we get into this, you'll start, for those of you that maybe haven't looked at this as much in the past, you start seeing all these different source funds on the side of D, the G1, G2, G3. Those are, so the G1 is water utility, G2 is wastewater utility, and G3 is stormwater utility. So in this case, the $230,000 affects our borrow not at all. It's only utility funds in this case. The stormwater utility would purchase that. So not that we don't need to worry about it, it's just that doesn't affect our
General
debt
fund.
service general fund.
Right, money's not in the borrow for that. And then, the next one down is replacing our 1.5-ton pickup truck with a plow on the front. The next section down is replacing pickup trucks. Most of you have seen my spreadsheet of life cycle of pickup trucks. Certain vehicles we run 15 years, other vehicles we run 20 years, and both of those exceed the state rate, or state program. Then you get into equipment, we're gonna end up needing to replace the chipper out in 2022. Budgeting for a leaf vacuum, that was in there last year, and have that budgeted for 2021 yet. and then adding a mini excavator, just earmarked out there. We rented one last week for doing that excavation on Center Street, and it cut that time of our digging down by 75%. Having our tractor backhoe just basically bailing out stone from the main breaks, and the mini excavator was excavating down to the main and cleaning along the main. And the guys did a phenomenal job with 2 pieces of equipment. Rather than taking a full day to do that, they were done and cleaned up by 1 o'clock. Just, that piece of equipment will come in handy. We're still working out details with renting stuff from Sunbelt. Things have been going good on some things I thought we got charged a little more than I thought we should have with them. And then getting down to lawnmower replacement, and then the last one is refuse cans, which we purchased this year, and just speculating that we'll need some again in the future here.
Mike, do you have something?
I do, I just go, the refuse truck, what do you think the value's gonna be when are we trading it in, or are we?
The old one we're trading in, and we won't know an exact number until they look at how many hours are on it the day that, the demo that I've committed to purchase already isn't built yet.
Okay.
But they're gonna get it, they're supposed to be getting it this month, and then they're gonna demo it at X number of places, and then it's gonna be our truck. So at that
Oh.
date, I've already put our name on that truck for purchase. And that's why the 230 is in there, that'd buy it, but that number is also gonna be smaller than that once they give us the $30,000 to $40,000, I'm hoping, trade-in.
So is our sweeper pretty much dead in the water?
No.
I mean, you said you were gonna get a demo or one, or you're
Yep,
mowing
but
it out
I'll be
yet?
able to trade that in also.
Okay. Next question is that leaf vacuum, is that brand new, you figuring, 40,000? Cause we were looking one time for a used one
For
for
three-
12 to 15,000.
No, 3,000 is that one I could have bought.
Okay. But there was another one we looked at from Sheboygan that was a little bit higher than.
Yeah, those were 10 to 12, or 12,000, 12 to 15 for a used one. But that one from Lemira sold for 3,000.
I know there's some residents it's a big item for them, that, I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know, I'm gonna have to look at it, so.
All right, thank you.
So that's pretty much my equipment.
Any other questions on then page 9? And moving on to page 10, that's our resurfacing. As you noticed, in 2019, we originally had Winnebago Street in there, which was like $100,000. We feel comfortable moving it out. We rearranged everything because of it, mainly because of the fire apparatus, just to try and minimize that 2019 borrow a little bit less. So what we're proposing to do in 2019 now is Lake Shore Drive, Indiana to Van Dyne down there. That section that's basically between the garage and the new intersection by Prospect. Just doing a overlay to buy it sometime until we do a full reconstruct. Those are always, that's basically what we're doing on Minnesota Avenue this year. It's just kind of buying some time, so we thought it'd be a good timing to do that and spend a little bit less. But you know, the rest of them are, this is always that budget that you do your best guess at this point, and 2 years down the road, you realize something else needs it worse. So, you know, we try to do $100,000 a year. And then adding on the crack filling and parking lot, you end up at 115 to 125, so. Questions on that? And then this next one, the last one, is the street reconstruction. So that's like we just did Indiana Avenue, where we actually go in and reconstruct the street. Our next item we've been talking about for probably close to 15 years is Bestshot Avenue. Needs it dearly. All the utilities need to be replaced. It's an expensive project. So you'll see that in 2020, and then we always do it in 2 years. As most of you are probably aware, we do our reconstructs in 2 years. We do all the underground work and the street base 1 year, and then we pave it, curb and gutter, the following year. So that's why you'll see the 2 years for each project. And then the next one we're looking at is that Minnesota Avenue that we're overlaying this year. If you recall, we're basically buying 6 to 7 years because we have a real good chance at getting some grant dollars for that. So that's out in 2023. So if we get those grant dollars, it's at 80% funding of the general fund portion of it likely. So, you know, it's gonna cut that number down significantly. Sure.
Is that gonna happen?
We hope. It's all, right now, it's all financially related, when we feel the time is right financially wise. Because we're getting to that point where we need to do something, we need to add another well. The issue involved with it is by adding the well, we may have to add a lot of treatment. So there's that question, until you start using it, you don't know, so.
Are you looking at shutting any well down?
No. No, but we're getting to the point where we've grown so much with the town of Fond du Lac and the DNR regulations. It's getting to the point where we need to look at it soon. And when I say soon, I mean 5 to 10 years. And I mean, we said that 5 years ago.
I know we did.
It's just, it's financially right now, we gotta pick the right time financially to make it fit in, so.
Big number.
It is a big number. Mhm. So that's the capital. I don't think there's anything real surprising in there. It's nothing real new, I guess, so. That'll be our first run at the capital, and then obviously we'll bring that back probably. I mean, if you have any questions at any time through this, please reach out to us. But as far as discussing the capital at the board level, it's probably gonna be after we're done with all the rest of the departments going through their general budget, operating budgets. So that'll probably be in October. But if you have any questions in the meantime, or you get home tonight and think about something, let me know.
Anything else on the CIP? All right, moving down to communications. Any communications? Any unfinished business? Any new business? Under new business, did you want to talk about like these on here also, or those?
So,
items?
yeah, I mean, this is the same discussion I had at the training as these items. I mean, communication, unfinished business and old business used to be on some, it really shouldn't be on there, unless you actually have an item listed, if it's unfinished and you list an item under there. So I'll take those off. And then new business is fine, as long as we're using it. What it's really meant to be is if one of the board members says, hey, at the next meeting, I'd like to have this on the agenda, and that's all it is. There's not discussion, it's just, I'd like to have this on the next agenda. Or just a statement about something like you'd want to see on the next meeting. That's really what it's there for, so we'll leave that on.
So you're talking about taking off unfinished business and communications also, or can we do like communications under announcements?
Yeah, we could move that. Communications can stay on there as long as it's just a communication, you know, that's where you would have maybe somebody from the library board showed up and wanted to give a quick review of something or explain something, like you had last time on our citizen participation.
Okay. Anything else under new business? All right, closed session. Need a motion to go into closed session.
I'll make the motion to go into closed session. Item number 1, the discussion of personnel issue under Wisconsin statutes 1985, Part 1, Part C, considering employment, promotion, compensation or performance, evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction and exercises responsibility. Item number 1, receptionist, office assistant hiring.
Can I get a second, please?
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call?
Sorry, Price,
Yes.
Streeter.
Yes.
Stutz.
Yes.
Will.
Here, yes.
All right, we are in closed
Yes.
session.